Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carolyn if you're new here. Today's video is going to be on job interview tips and a little bit of salary negotiation. So I kind of came up with the idea of this video because I've had a lot of friends who graduated recently in 2020 and this is their first time looking for jobs. And so I thought I would create a video just because it'd be a lot easier, and I think it also be really helpful for other people because I feel like a lot of companies always ask those generic questions. Things like, well, tell me about yourself. And you're just kind of like, I just want to work here. And there's also the questions that are kind of like, well, why do you want to work for this company? And then you're just kind of like, to make money. Why else am I here? To get experience, to know whether or not I want to do this for the rest of my life. So I thought I'd answer a couple of those generic questions because I've been interviewing a lot personally for a job search myself. I luckily have another job now, and I was referred to by a friend, so it's kind of proven that, these answers are pretty decent. I think the most important thing in finding a job is honestly referrals and relationships are probably the most important because especially right now, I'm sure companies are just literally putting hundreds of resumes through their automatic tracking system or whatever. The thing that scans people's resumes and are like, oh, do you have what I want? A lot of companies put job descriptions where they're entry level, have all these skills, and then they're needs 5 years of experience, and you're just kind of like, what the heck? Going back to my point though, I think referrals are probably the most important thing just because they're the thing that is going to get you the interview in the first place. But interviews are much more harder to land. I basically applied to 150 jobs and I was basically getting no responses. People were just rejecting me left and right. I thought I'd break down a couple of interviews, at least for the introductory ones. And I'm in marketing, so if you're in computer science and you're doing coding, or if you're I don't know, a product manager or something like that, these are behavioral questions. I'm so sorry, I wish I could code, but I really cannot. So anyways, let's jump right in. So I have a document here that I wrote down. I'm basically going to talk about the first phone interview, try to figure out what the company does in 2 to 3 sentences. I have some example questions here, and I'm going to basically tell you how I would answer these questions. So an interviewer has always asked me why do you want to work at this company? And I basically would say, oh, I'm really interested in doing this type of role, and when I saw this opportunity, I thought that this company would give me such a great opportunity to grow, challenge myself, sound as if you're super, super interested, which you should be. People love people who are enthusiastic, interested. This is going to bother me when I edit. So basically try to figure out the bare minimum of the company, of what they do, how to describe them in a couple sentences. And then maybe you can say things like, I'm really passionate about marketing, and I think that this role would further help my marketing skills and it would challenge me a lot. I noticed in the job description that, it would require me to write a little bit of content, and that's something that I've been trying to work on, and blah, blah, or whatever. Most of the time, I feel there's honestly no right answer, because if people were well, why do you want to work at this company? You would just be I just want a job, and I just want to make money, and I just want benefits. Why else would I want to work at this company? I guess some people are actually really passionate, but I'm telling you, this is how most of the people in the tech world I feel get by. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. So the next question that I thought about is, why are you interested in this field? And I kind of go into a life story personally because I like to talk about something that's personal but shows that I am open to challenges and growth. So I kind of talk about when I was young, my mom really wanted me to do accounting, but I didn't want to do accounting because I just felt it seemed boring, extremely repetitive. So even though it's a pretty stable job career, I thought I wanted to try something different. And one of my friends in college actually introduced me to marketing, and so I was just wow, that's exactly what I want to do. Why the heck would I say in accounting? Not that I'm saying accounting is bad, totally fine if you love it. It just wasn't for me personally. I couldn't find it super fun, to be honest. So basically if they ask why are you interested, I would say if you can give some sort of personal story, maybe, if you're actually interviewing for a comp-sci position, be oh, I'm really interested in honing my programming skills, or I'd really love to be alongside a team where I can learn and have a couple of mentors to help me grow, blah, blah, stuff like that. People love to see like growth, challenges, leadership, all that fun stuff. So the third question for phone interviews I hear a lot are, tell me about yourself. So for phone interviews, you need to know like your background, like inside and out. Like luckily, since we're in COVID, you can have your resume out and you can be like, oh, well, I used to do this internship or I used to work at this job and I gathered these skills. I kind of talk about how like, oh, I graduated from college a couple years ago and I did this internship in digital marketing and this was something I was really interested in pursuing. I moved on to another job in marketing and then, you know, now I'm interested in doing like a specific type of marketing. They kind of want to know like your professional story at this point. They don't want you to be like, oh, well, I like to watch YouTube in my free time, which I totally do. I like to play Animal Crossing on my Switch. You know, I love talking to friends. I love playing League of Legends or something like that. Like, this is not the time, okay? Pretty much they want to know, like, your professional growth and they want to know, like, more about you. And every job is honestly important. If you don't have any experience and all you've done is maybe, like, you know, work at McDonald's or something like that, you can talk about, like, your customer service skills because customers can be a real... Anyways, yeah, just talk about, like, your strengths and challenges, and these questions are definitely like they're designed for you to talk about like your professional life and skills and basically see what you can bring to the table. There's really a motorcycle outside. People keep doing this every day. Yeah, basically they want to know what you can bring to the table, which you know you can bring the whole dang table. So let's show them that you can. Okay, so another question that some people ask is like, what is your greatest weakness or like, what is your greatest strengths? So you never want to seem like super conceited, but you never want to seem like, oh, like I'm lazy. Like I just suck at time management. I hate challenges. Like, no. Don't do that. Okay, don't do that because you need to show that you can take leadership, that you're open to challenges, that you're open-minded, blah, blah. Even if you're not. Just say that you are because that will just leave off a better impression. I know that sounds terrible because in a way you're lying, but like I kid you not, I feel like companies typically look for this kind of stuff. Like they always want like, you know, go-getters and like people who like to challenge themselves and people who do more than they're asked for or do more than the job description or whatever, because those are the people that they want to keep. Those are the people when they become an intern, they're like, oh, could you come back and work for us full-time? You want that full-time job offer. For example, for myself, when they ask me like, what is my greatest weakness? I would say something like, oh, you know, I used to struggle with being able to prioritize things because I always get so many items on my list to do and I never knew which one I should do first kind of thing. And so I was talking about my progress with my previous manager at my previous company, saying like I used to make a list of things that I had to do that week and I would talk to her about it and I would say, I think this week I'm gonna prioritize like 1, 2, and 3. And you know, she would kind of just approve it. And then after a little bit of time, I was able to just not have to get her approval anymore. I already knew like how I was going to be able to prioritize things. And people like to see that growth, progress. Yeah, I've said this like a million times already. But basically, like when you say weakness, it should be something that you're improving on. It could be like, I struggle with public speaking, but like I'm learning to, you know, do more presentations or like taking places at conferences or panels. So just don't be outright. Just don't say things like I'm lazy. Trust me, it's not gonna get you anywhere. I would say that phone screens are usually like they're definitely much more introductory. Okay. Basically, I think phone screens can be introductory. Like some recruiters will literally just call you and be like, okay, so this is a job. Like, can you do it or not? Like, what's your salary expectation? Like, what, you know, what's your background? Like, they might only ask like a couple questions and then the rest of the time they'll tell you like, oh, this is what the job entails. Like, are you available? Like, are you okay with these kind of circumstances? Like, it might be a contract position. They might go into more detail about it. Things like that. You should just have, like, a bunch of, like, scenario questions ready because I have had scenario questions asked to me, like, in the first interview. Usually, phone screens are more basic questions. They want to know your background. They want to know whether you have the skills for the role. And if you don't have the skills, are you a fast learner? Think about examples where you've improved the system for things. Maybe you hosted events that had large attendance, challenges, and like how you've overcome them. Just try to think of like very like good examples. I can try and look for some articles that I can link that have like really good practice questions. Maybe practice with a friend, honestly, a good trusted friend, maybe a mentor, someone you know professionally, and just kind of like do questions back and forth with them. I think practice definitely helps. I remember when I first started job hunting, like I was so rusty because I haven't job hunted in a year. But after practice, people would just call me for interviews. I wouldn't even prep. I'd just be like, oh, like I already know what I'm gonna say. Like I already know what situations like I would bring up and things like that. If you pass the phone screen, then you'll go to like a second interview, and that's when you'll probably get more situational questions. That second interview is most likely the hiring manager. So the first one's usually the recruiter, the second one is like the hiring manager. And then the hiring manager also wants to know your background. So definitely know your background inside and out again, because you're gonna have to explain it to everybody you interview with. And then they'll ask you more situational questions. So for example, I used to do event marketing, and so someone was asking me like, oh, can you list out all of the steps for when you organize a webinar? Or like something that was like, oh, if an event isn't getting as many registrations, or if a product isn't selling well, like how are you going to be able to make up those missed registrations or those missed sales? I've also had questions where they were like, oh, tell me about a time when you took initiative. That was more of like a values question. So some companies will actually do like values interviews where they will want to see whether your values align with theirs. Have you taken initiative before? Or like, tell me a time when you thought outside the box, or what was your greatest achievement? They might also ask things like, what's your experience with like Salesforce or Marketo or like these types of tools? I will emphasize this a lot, but if you do not know the skill, just be ready to learn. I would say that this does not work in terms of coding, but if it's like a marketing tool, like I went to a company and I did not know Salesforce at all, and they were just kind of like, okay, well, we'll teach you. And I was like, okay, great. Companies are basically trying to look for people who are fast learners, people who are willing to learn, and people who are willing to put in the extra work. At the end of these interviews, they like to ask like, oh, well, do you have any questions? And they'll also do this in the phone screen as well. But when they ask like, oh, do you have any questions for me? Have questions to ask, okay? I literally used to just not ask questions, and that was just so bad because it just seems like you don't care about the company. You don't care about like, oh, what direction are they going in? You don't care about company culture. You don't care about like what makes a good candidate. So I thought of some examples of questions that you could ask when you're doing an interview. So a really good one, especially now since we're in COVID, could be like, what is your company doing right now to adapt to COVID-19? Are you guys returning to the office anytime soon? Because like obviously you want to know. You would be really surprised if, you know, you were signing up for a job and they're like, actually, we're going back into the office next week. And you're like, oh my God, wait, what? Like, I thought this was like a working from home, like until like the end of 2020. I personally also like to ask other questions like, what is your company culture? Why do you come into work every day? What do you like most about working at the company? And then questions that you should ask the hiring manager is like, what is the day-to-day responsibilities within this role? What do you expect to see from a successful candidate? And then maybe like, what are your top 3 goals this year? I would say that another good method is you can search up these hiring managers on LinkedIn, look at their role, maybe if they have a description, and then just like ask them a little bit more about like what their role is, how they contribute to the company, because people love to talk about themselves. But also just like make sure to ask questions that make it seem like you're more interested in the company and that like you want to work there. That's mostly what I have for like interviews as well as like question asking. And then usually from my experience, I've only had 2 jobs, like 2 adult jobs. I would say that mostly they ask a lot of situational questions. If they ask a question that's like, you've never been in that situation before, they want to know, what would you do if you were in that situation? So I've been asked a question like this before, where it was like, what would you do if like your email campaign was doing very poorly or whatever? And I don't know, I just made that one up, to be honest. And I would just be like, well, I guess if my email campaign was doing very poorly, then I would probably go to other types of media to help spread awareness for like whatever I was trying to send out, or change the messaging in the email campaign or things like that. I've also been asked questions that are like, oh, if you're doing events and one of your events has like really low attendance, like what would you do in order to like increase attendance for this event? And we've already done like A, B, and C. Like what else would you do? And then it's okay to like step back for a second and think about how you're gonna answer. Obviously not for like 5 minutes, but like maybe take 30 seconds and just be like, okay, if we've already promoted it on like Facebook and we've already promoted it on like meetup.com, maybe we can use Slack channels to promote the event, or we can partner with other meetup groups or things like that. Just try to think on your feet as much as you can. I know it's gonna be hard. It's definitely hard, but once you like practice and get it done, like pretty much it'll get a lot better. So lastly, I just want to talk about like negotiation and pay, because this is something I feel like that's really not talked about as much. At least for me, I didn't really know about it, and a lot of my friends who are just graduating probably wouldn't have known about it. Basically, when you ask for like a salary, especially like in the Bay Area from where I am, I would say that people definitely tend to lowball you. They always try to go a little bit less than how much their actual budget is. And you should never try and accept like a first offer. You always want to negotiate for more. It could be things like working from home more, or it could be like different kinds of benefits, more pay. Usually people negotiate for more pay. So when you have a range, I would say that you should look on Glassdoor to see what like the average is, and then honestly tack on like 5 to 10,000 more on that average, because I feel like Glassdoor is kind of outdated. I feel like companies usually can pay more, especially if they're like startups. Startups usually can pay more, but like older companies like SAP or like Oracle, I don't know if Oracle's actually that old. Basically, like older companies that have been around for a while, they usually don't pay as well as like startups. Startups will pay you like really well because obviously they want to like go public and all that fun stuff. Especially as women, we get underpaid so much, so always ask for more. And some tips from my previous manager is like whatever offer they like offer you, just be like, oh well, that's like a little bit less than I was expecting. Can I have a day or two to think about it? And then be sure that you have a number that you would be willing to accept in your mind. So for example, if in the first interview you're like, oh, I want like 40K to 50K, and they offer you 40K, be like, oh well, that's like a lot less than I thought it would be. And they'd be like, oh well, how would you be able to accept this offer today? And you would be like, well, I would accept it if it was at like 55K immediately. Most likely they won't like ever rescind your offer. Actually, he told me that they will never rescind your offer if you ask for more. If they do, that's probably a shady company. You probably shouldn't work there, to be honest. Don't be afraid to push, and just make sure that, you know, you're satisfied with what you're getting, because job hunting is draining. Job hunting is hard, it's discouraging, it's depressing. Filling out the same application sucks. But yeah, I hope this video was a little bit helpful for everyone that's job searching right now. But yeah, I thought this was a fun video to make, and I hope that I'll see you guys in my next video. All right, bye.